Hey guys, and welcome back to our second podcast of the 10 Minutes Agile series by Luxoft. My name is Tom Richter. I'm working as an innovation consultant for DXC. And with me today is Lewis again. And we are going to talk a little bit about the Agile frameworks, building on the last session and deep diving in what are the frameworks available, where in which space am I using which framework, and how can I work with those. So Lewis, welcome back.
Thanks for inviting me again, Tom. I think we have some pending topics from the last conversation because we only explained what is agility very briefly, but we were talking about frameworks, and maybe some people that are starting the Agile journey don't really recognize what is a framework, what is the difference between a framework and methodology. So let's talk about this.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And basically, you've already took my first question right away from me. So we would like to, first of all, of course, deep dive into, we've described the mindset of agility in the last session. Now we want to deep dive in what is a framework, how can agility be applied? So Lewis, with that, right back to you. So what would you say is an agile framework?
Yeah, so do you remember that we talked about what is not agility, and we said Scrum and Kanban is not agility. It's just a framework that you're using to achieve the goals that you have. So basically, a framework is just a set of tools, processes, everything that you can use to achieve any specific goal. If we have maybe some developers here listening to us, you can relate to JavaScript frameworks as well. And you can say, okay, a JavaScript framework is something that you have as a tool, and you can use whatever you need, and what you need, then you just leave it behind. It is exactly the same here. So a framework is just a set of processes that will help you achieve a goal and that you can adapt to your teams. And as an example, we have Scrum. So Scrum is a framework. You have a Scrum guide that is telling you some details on how to do things and is giving you some tools. Like, for example, a tool that you will use to do continuous improvement is a retrospective. It doesn't mean that you need to do it like that. It means that you can use the framework and adapt it to you, and you can use it to continue your process.
Okay. You've just mentioned Scrum. So looking at the Scrum framework, for just exemplary for a moment, what would you say makes the Scrum framework agile, or how does the Scrum framework allow us to work in an agile way?
So something very important from the Scrum framework is that it has 3 principles that we can base this framework on. The first one is transparency. That means that everyone that is interacting with the team will have access or will be understanding what is being done inside the team or inside the project. And then we have inspection and adaptation. That means that in every cycle that we have, we will do some sort of, it can be a retrospective, it can be any other inspection process. And based on the inspection, based on the results, we will adapt for the next iteration. It is not only on the way that we work, but it's also on the software or on the product that we produce. So if we just describe Scrum in a very general way, so we know that this is the most popular framework. We know that it uses an iterative approach. We do sprints, usually 2-3 weeks sprints. And what is a sprint? A sprint is just a time-boxed amount of work that we can produce. And this work that we will be producing is usually an increment on the product. I think this is also one of the core principles of Scrum, and that is really important. That at the end of the sprint, we will be producing part of the software that we will delivering to the customer. So we can go through the inspection and adaptation process. We inspect the results, and then we adapt for the next iteration on what needs to be done.
Totally agree with you. Maybe to clarify one thing, You've just mentioned the term increment. Could you maybe go a little bit more into detail what exactly a done increment is, which is generated during a sprint?
Yeah, so an increment is something that is part of the product, but that it can go already to the customer. So an increment is any amount of work that you put into the product, but that is fully complete. And if we talk about some other methodologies or some other ways of working, usually the amount of work that you produce during months, maybe even years, cannot go to the customer directly. So in this case, we are putting everything that we have done during the sprint and try to release it as soon as possible.
Totally agree with you. And also to point out one additional thing, why are we doing that? So what's the great benefit of it? And that's especially in the Scrum framework, the reduced feedback cycle. So at the end of every sprint, I have someone, in ideal case, a customer, inspecting the product, looking over what we have done, and based on the done increment, having something to touch, something to inspect, which is not just an abstract concept, but really the final end product. And by that, we can include their direct feedback and improve the software to whatever they really want and not what they try to describe in the very first meeting.
Yeah, agree. So it's inspect and adapt, right? It's we need to keep always in mind that.
Yeah,
agree.
I think besides Scrum, the most famous or most used framework is Kanban. So jumping there, what would you say, how does a Kanban framework work and what is it allowing me to do?
Yeah, so, well, Scrum is the most popular one, but you can also find a lot of teams using Kanban. It is really important to say that Kanban wasn't originally designed for IT. So we adopted in IT, of course, but so Kanban is originally supporting the just-in-time and lean principles, and these are for manufacturing. So you can say that the real benefit of Kanban is trying to find bottlenecks and waste in the teams. So if you have a team that is continuously producing any value, if you use Kanban, you will be able to find where are these bottlenecks that are not allowing you to increase the value production. In this case, so we're not producing cars, we're producing value or an increment to the product. And in this case, it also works really good. And usually the people find the Kanban boards in some offices and they say, okay, yeah, they are doing Kanban. But Kanban is not only about using boards like we talked about in the last podcast. It is about also knowing how to improve the system and knowing how to increase the amount of work that we're producing. So there are a lot of reports and techniques, and there are really good books about how to improve a system in Kanban. This is really Kanban. It is not just using a board and moving things around.
Totally agree with you.
Maybe in an episode in the future we can talk about Kanban only, and another one only Scrum. So we go more in detail on what is each one of them.
I totally agree with you, and especially want to point out one principle which you've mentioned on which Kanban is based, and that's the lean principle. The lean principle is something, especially coming from the manufacturing area, which it just has one simple design principle, and that's eliminate waste. So running lean, doing everything to optimize the efficiency, which is of course most important in the manufacturing industry, but it's also very, very crucial in working in software development. So looking at Kanban and the Scrum framework, would you say one could use them in combination, or have you seen that in practical already?
I've seen Scrumban, which is kind of a mix. And again, these are frameworks. Let's don't forget about the concept of frameworks. If you are following the principles and the values of Agile, then you can take these frameworks and you can adapt them to your organization. There are some industries, for example, the automotive industry, that have very specific requirements on how to release, on quality, on some other topics, that it allows us to take these frameworks and build our own. I have seen it in practical examples where we had to adapt these frameworks. And yes, these are, for example, our scale model was based on Scrum, but we were also using Kanban in the same project for some specific needs. So yeah, I think you can mix them in a project. It's not a problem. Have you had this kind of experience?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, most common one I've seen is, of course, using Scrum with a Kanban board. That's not using the Kanban framework. But I'm totally agree with you. The frameworks are giving you a set of things which you can do, a set of principles, of processes, of methods, of roles, which can be applicable. But basically, it often depends on the project, on how to use them correctly, how to make the most out of them. Luis, we have a problem. We're again out of time. So thanks a lot again for all these great insights. I think what we definitely haven't covered today is talking about how to scale those frameworks. So how to use them on an enterprise level environment, or how to use them with maybe 100 Scrum teams or something like that. So that's definitely something which we should cover in the future. Guys, thanks a lot again for participating. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, if you want to see a specific episode or something like that, please let us know in the comments, and talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Tom.